Imagine the absolute void, not the void of space, but the void of the North Atlantic at the height of a 10th century winter. You are on a 30-meter wooden ship, the edges just inches above the waterline. Around you, nothing but icebergs and a darkness that seems to devour light. The wind cuts your skin like an ice razor, and the temperature has dropped to 20 degrees below zero. In this scenario, human logic says only one thing: you need fire. You need a flame to warm your blood, to dry your clothes, to signal life. But here is the dark secret that most Hollywood movies hide from you. On those vessels, fire was your greatest enemy. If you lit a fire on that deck, you would die. If you tried to heat up a soup, the ship would become your funeral pyre in minutes. Today, we are going to dive into the most extreme survival engineering in human history. We will understand how the Vikings, the greatest navigators the world has ever seen, crossed thousands of miles of lethal ocean without a single glowing ember. How does the human body resist freezing without external heat? What did they eat? And, above all, what was the biological hack that allowed them to sleep in the ice and wake up alive? Get ready. What you're about to hear defies everything you know about human endurance. And if you think you're tough because you take a cold shower in the summer, you have no idea what you're about to discover. To understand why fire was forbidden, we need to look at the anatomy of a Drakkar or a Knar. These weren't just big canoes. They were masterpieces of naval engineering, but they were also extremely flammable. Viking ships were built using the clinker method with overlapping oak planks, but the secret of waterproofing was what made them dangerous. To seal the gaps between the planks, the Norsemen used a mixture of animal hair, wool, and most importantly, pine tar. Tar is highly combustible. The sails were made of heavy wool, often treated with fat or resin to repel water. The ropes were made of dry plant fibers. In short, the ship was a gigantic floating torch waiting for a spark. Imagine the panic. A Viking ship in the middle of the ocean has no lifeboats. If the wood caught fire, the crew had two choices: burn alive or jump into 0-degree water, where death by thermal shock happens in less than 2 minutes. Therefore, the laws of the sea were clear. Fire was banned. But if there was no fire, how did they not freeze? The answer begins with the clothes, but not the ones you're imagining. Forget those fake leather armors from TV series. The reality was much more technological. Viking survival began at the skin. They used a layering system that today we call the 3-layer system, used by Everest climbers. The first layer was fine linen. Linen absorbs sweat and wicks it away from the skin, because in the cold, sweat is your worst enemy. If you sweat and moisture gets trapped against your body, you will get hypothermia as soon as you stop moving. The second layer was the real magic, Nordic sheep's wool. This was no ordinary wool. Scandinavian sheep evolved to have two types of fibers, an inner one, soft and insulating, and an outer one, long and oily, rich in lanolin. Lanolin is a natural wax that repels water. The Vikings created fabrics called vadmal. It was a wool so dense it was practically windproof. But here's the detail that will blow your mind. Wool is one of the only materials on the planet that maintains its thermal insulation power, even when it is 100% wet. Due to a natural chemical reaction between water and the protein fibers in the wool, it actually generates a small amount of heat when it first gets wet. But clothes alone were not enough. There was the problem of the extremities. Your fingers and feet are the first to be sacrificed by the body to keep the vital organs warm. The Vikings solved this by using dry hay inside leather boots, creating an air barrier. And the famous mittens were made of felted wool, so thick they functioned like ovens for the hands. Still, clothes only conserve the heat the body produces. But where did that heat come from if they had no hot food? Think of your body as a biological bonfire. To maintain a temperature of 37 degrees under extreme cold, your metabolism needs fuel. A lot of fuel. A Viking sailor on an expedition consumed between 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day. For comparison, an average adult today consumes 2,000, but they didn't have a stove to fry a steak or cook pasta. They ate everything cold. The onboard diet was based on foods that didn't spoil and were energy-dense. The main ones were skaya, dried fish, and most importantly, whale or seal fat. They chewed on pieces of pure fat. As disgusting as it may seem to us, fat is nature's most efficient, slow-burning fuel. By ingesting large amounts of fat and protein, the body begins a process called thermogenesis. Essentially, your stomach becomes your heater. And to drink? Fresh water was a luxury difficult to stock. They drank bland, a mixture of fermented whey with water. Alcohol from beer or mead was also used, but with caution, because despite the sensation of warmth, alcohol dilates the blood vessels and makes you lose internal heat faster. Every sip was calculated. But now we reach the critical point. Physical effort keeps you warm during the day while you row. But what about at night, when exhaustion hits and you need to close your eyes on a wet, freezing deck? This is where survival becomes a team sport. Naval archaeology has given us a fascinating clue. On Viking ships, there were no beds. What there were the hudfat. The hudfat was a large sleeping bag made of animal skins, usually reindeer or sheep, treated to be waterproof on the outside and furry on the inside. But there was a golden rule. No one slept alone. The Vikings slept in pairs. By sharing the sleeping bag, they used each other's radiant heat. Two men in a sleeping bag create a microclimate, where the internal temperature can be 15 or 20 degrees higher than the outside. But there was an even more extreme detail. On certain winter routes, the women who stayed on land would sew the sleeves of the men's tunics at the wrists and collar after they put them on. They were literally sealed inside their clothes. For urinating or any other necessity, it was a logistical nightmare. But this seal prevented hot air from escaping. The man became a walking human greenhouse. They only opened these seams with their knives when they reached their destination or when combat was imminent. Imagine the mental discipline required to spend weeks sealed in wool and fat, sharing sweat and heat with another warrior to keep from being killed by the cold. This wasn't just survival. It was a form of biological brotherhood. You might be thinking this is just historian theory, but in 2007, science decided to test this. A crew of 65 volunteers built the Sea Stallion, an exact replica of a 30-meter Viking ship, and sailed from Denmark to Ireland. They wore the wool clothes, ate the cold food, and slept under the open sky. What they discovered was shocking. Even with all the modern technology available in support boats, the crew on the Viking ship, using the methods from 1,000 years ago, stayed healthy and functional. The system worked. The Vikings weren't brutes who ignored the cold. They were masters of thermodynamics and human physiology. They turned their own bodies into the furnace the ship couldn't have. The history of the Vikings teaches us that the limit of what a human being can endure is much greater than we imagine. While today we complain if the air conditioning is 2 degrees off the ideal, our ancestors conquered entire oceans by being sewn into their clothes and sleeping in the ice, relying only on the heat of the companion beside them. The true technology of the Vikings was not the iron of their swords, but the resilience of their mind. They accepted discomfort as the price of freedom and discovery. If you've made it this far, you now know a secret that few people do. You no longer see the Viking just as a barbarian with an axe, but as a survival genius. And now, I want to hear from you. Would you survive a week on a ship like this? What would be harder for you? The lack of hot food or having to sleep sewn into a sheepskin bag? Comment below with the word resilience, so I know you are part of the 1% who watches deep content to the end. If you enjoyed this dive into real history, don't forget to like and subscribe. Here we don't just tell stories, we decipher how humanity got here. Until the next journey, explorer, the sea may be cold, but knowledge is what keeps us warm.